Hello and welcome to our second entry in the class guide series for Gloomhaven 2nd edition. I'm Emerging Boat, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Vermling Mindthief. This is one of our 6 starting classes. I have played the Mindthief for 2nd edition up through level 6. There are videos of me playing the Mindthief on YouTube. You are welcome to go and check out some of those. I did multiple builds kind of with the Mindthief because I respect from one build into another, just so that I could kind of get some different perspective on some of the different things that you can do as the Mindthief and see how viable certain strategies were. And even though I haven't played the Mindthief at levels 7 through 9, at least in 2nd edition, I have experience in playing him in the 1st edition of the game. I've played a lot of Frosthaven, Gloomhaven Digital. I have a lot of Haven game experience, so hopefully I can still provide you some valuable insight into those later level up cards, but I can speak more to some of the earlier level ups up through level 6 because I have experience playing those in this game recently. Anyway, the way that I'm going to structure this video guide is that we are going to start with an overview of the class. Then we are going to go into all the card discussion. We're going to talk about each card individually. I'm generally going to be talking about why I think the card can be good. In some cases, I might talk about why I don't think it's a good card, but most cards in this game are generally good. It's a much better improved system from Gloomhaven 1st edition, so I'm excited to be able to talk to you about why you would take a card as opposed to why you wouldn't, but I will also talk about why you might steer towards certain cards depending on what type of build you're going for. So we will talk about the level 1 cards, we'll talk about the level X cards, and then we're going to go and talk through every card that you can look at for your level ups. So from levels 2 through 9, we will talk about each of those cards individually, and then we will talk about why you might take a specific card over another at that level up. After we go through all of our ability cards, we're going to take a look at the perks, then we're going to take a look at the Masteries, then we're going to talk about that solo scenario item, and then finally I'll wrap it all up with some final thoughts. So the Vermling Mindthief is a 10 card class. It is a complexity rating of 3 out of 5. It has a melee rating of 4 out of 5, a 2 out of 5 on ranged, a 4 out of 5 on mobility, a 1 out of 5 on support, a 1 out of 5 on defense, and a 5 out of 5 on control. It has elemental affinities with ice and dark, although especially at earlier levels you are really going to be focusing on that ice affinity, and the dark isn't really going to come into play as much until your later levels. Your signature mechanic is the augment system. Augments are actions that allow you to enhance the abilities of your melee attacks. They can do things like add damage to your attacks, add negative conditions to your attacks, grant your summons additional attacks. These are persistent non-loss cards, and so they are not just designed in a way that you can switch between them, you really are encouraged to switch between them. Augments and just some of the abilities that you can get outside of your augments can provide the Mindthief with a wide variety, a huge versatility of things that you can do. Was that terrible English? Yes, it was, but hopefully you got the point. You also have a very small health pool. Like I mentioned before, you have a lot of melee attacks. The augments are things that focus on enhancing your melee attacks. So you're going to be in melee quite a bit with enemies, and so you do need to be careful about how you manage to not get attacked, because you cannot afford to take many attacks. Otherwise, you're going to be losing cards, and losing cards is never good. Your 10 card class, that's a average hand size for a class, but if you start losing those too early, you are going to be exhausting very, very quickly. So I think managing that survivability is why it starts to lean into that 3 out of 5 complexity rating. On top of, because of your versatility, you have to know when it is best to do certain things, because you can be very effective if you're switching between those things you can do, but you have to know when the timing is right to do certain things. I'm not necessarily going to talk about specific builds that you can do with the Mindthief, because I think of how much versatility there is. There are a lot of ways that you can build the Mindthief, but what I'm going to focus on are what I'm going to refer to as specialties. And in my mind, one build would have, 1 or 2 different specialties that you're really focusing on. And to me, the specialties that I see with the Mindthief are, number 1, single target melee attack damage. Number 2, applying negative conditions. Number 3, summons. Number 4, direct control over enemies. When I'm trying to get my smooth brain mind to think about how I want to build a Mindthief, I'm generally thinking about what is the primary specialty that I want to focus on, and then what is my secondary specialty. Maybe I switch into that secondary specialty just based off of things that come up during the scenario. Maybe I'm planning to rotate through it at certain points, like as part of my rest cycle. Early on, those specialties may even just be based off of what scenario, what enemies you have coming up. As you start to level up, you are going to be really reinforcing what specialties you're trying to focus on. So it'll be a little bit harder to kind of change up those specialties later in, in your Mindthief career. But by no means are specialties mutually exclusive. Like, you're going to be mixing and matching them a little bit. And I really encourage you to try them out, see what you like, see what you enjoy playing. I think it is very easy to just fall into a default mindset of, oh, I'm just going to play, we'll talk about this more when we get into the specific card discussions, but I'm just going to default to playing this single target melee attack damage specialty because it feels like the simplest thing to do. And if you're a new player, that might be a great thing to just say, like, let me minimize the amount of decisions I'm making. Let me just focus on this as I start to get a hang of the Mindthief. I think it's a good place to start because it can be very powerful. But if you're only focusing on that, if you're really only trying that out, I think you're missing out on a lot of the fun and the power that you can really get into building your Mindthief in different ways. For my playthrough, I did focus on my primary specialty at first being single target melee attack damage dealing, and my secondary specialty being controlling enemies. Eventually, I changed that to my primary being summons and my secondary being controlling enemies. I had a ton of fun with both builds that I did, but all this to say, be flexible, try different things. And if you need help trying to figure out how you want to build the Mindthief, like, think in terms of those specialties and picking a primary and secondary specialty. And I guarantee you're going to be sick of me saying that word by the end of this video. But let's stop talking about the class overview. Let's get into the fun and exciting stuff of talking about our actual cards. And for the order of these cards, I am going to start with the level 1 cards and then the X cards. But at the level 1s, rather than just doing initiative order, I'm going to start with the 3 level 1 augments, then talk about the rest of the level 1 cards, and then talk about the X augment, and then the rest of the X cards. The X cards just kind of group together nicely, and then the augments, I think, I want to cover those first because I think they give important context to how the other cards at level 1 can be impactful. Our first augment and our first card that we're going to talk about is Withering Claw. The top action is an augment. It adds poison and muddle to all of your melee attacks, and then after you apply that augment, you get to do an attack 2 and immobilize, and that augment does apply to this attack, so it's ultimately going to be an attack 2, immobilize, poison, muddle. You get an experience for that, and it's a persistent ability, just like all of our augments are. The bottom action is control 1 enemy within range 4 and do an attack 2, with that enemy performing the action, and this is all at initiative 18. This augment is the core of the specialty for applying negative conditions. With every single one of your melee attacks, you're going to be applying both poison and muddle, which is very good. That muddle by itself is generally not going to be enough alone to be able to keep you at the front lines. You are still going to have to really be thinking about how do you get out of range of other monsters, how do you get allies in front of you to be able to take attacks instead of you taking attacks. But it also provides a convincing argument to have your allies come up and take some of those attacks for you if the enemy is going to be muddled to do less damage. The application of poison is also interesting, and I think it leads into an interesting conversation about what ends up dealing more damage over time, this augment or the augment we're going to talk about next. Because the poison isn't really going to be enhancing your attacks. Obviously, it'll enhance your attacks for any follow-up attacks you do. But how you have to consider it is how much bonus damage are you going to get on that enemy from other allies attacking that enemy. So if you're able to poison an enemy with high health or an enemy with high shield, you're going to get more value out of that poison because it's going to be increasing the damage from more and more attacks. The bottom action is one of our early control abilities where you're controlling an enemy and just having them do an attack 2. This ability does not scale super well at higher levels because it is just a static attack 2. We'll see some other control abilities later on that do scale better with enemy level. But at early levels, this is a good action. You may be able to do damage to an enemy that is not nearby. You can start chipping away at one of those ranged enemies that's just, an archer that's trying to pick off your allies. And an attack 2 doesn't sound like a lot, but an attack 2 as a bottom action assuming you're already doing melee attack as a top action, or some of those sorts of damage as a top action, like bottom attacks just are enhancers for the amount of damage you're doing that round. I think this is an interesting spot to be able to put a wound enhancement on it as well, on that bottom ability, because it can be very handy for things like being able to do an attack 2 wound against a shielded enemy on the back lines, and then just over the next couple of rounds, that enemy just bleeds out. It's very effective for doing that. So core card for negative condition specialty, and kind of at least an early core card for the control specialty, but at least a very good card for that one. Our second augment is the Mind's Weakness. This is a static +1 attack to all your melee attacks. Then after you play the augment, you get to do an attack 2 and then control the target of the attack ability and do an attack 2 from that enemy. Like all augments, this will give you 1 experience. It's persistent. And yeah, that's our top action. Our bottom action is an attack 1 wound, and our initiative is 75. This is the early core card for your single target melee damage dealing build. Being able to add +1 to all your melee attacks does make all of your melee attacks look significantly more interesting. But like I mentioned in the last card, I think it does kind of become an interesting conversation about what ends up doing more damage over time. Is it applying that poison from Withering Claw, or is it getting the static +1 to attack from the Mind's Weakness? I think in a lot of cases, especially at higher scenario levels, the Mind's Weakness, Withering Claw can end up winning out, at least in terms of total party damage output, but the Mind's Weakness is just so satisfying, because especially as you play this augment, you're doing an attack 3 yourself, and then assuming you don't kill that target, which you probably don't want to because you want to maximize this action, you're going to have that target do an attack 2. Now, I should have mentioned this on the last augment, but it is the enemies that you control during your augments do not benefit from your augment abilities, because it's not you making the melee attack. You are controlling that enemy, and without a certain perk, you are going to be drawing from the enemy's attack modifier deck for that control ability. But if you are going to lean into control attacks or the control abilities, you should really think about getting that perk that allows you to use your own modifier deck, especially as you build out your modifier deck and it becomes significantly better than the enemy attack modifier deck. Our bottom action is an attack 1 wound, which doesn't really sound like a whole lot, but I think the Mindthieves who are going to be really interested in this action are the ones who are going to be using the Withering Claw, because you could be doing 3 negative conditions with this attack. You're going to be doing wound, poison, and muddle. That is a very nice combination, especially considering that 2 of those 3 negative conditions will stick around for beyond that enemy's next turn. Initiative 75 is fine. Like, there are still a decent number of enemy abilities that can go after 75, but 75 is late enough that you can be consistently going after most enemies. So a core card for our melee single target damage dealing specialty, and a great card for our negative condition specialty. Next up, we have Psychic Blade. This is going to be the final level 1 augment that we'll talk about. We do have one more level X augment that we'll get to later. But the top action, as I said, is an augment. It allows you to turn your single target melee attack abilities into attacks that can target enemies up to 2 hexes away. Then you get to do an attack 3 curse and then control the target of that attack ability and have that target do move 1. You get an experience for doing this, just like all our augments. It's persistent. Move on to the bottom action, which is a move 3, and then add curse to all your melee attacks this round, and this is at initiative 77. This is a good utility card. I don't think you're generally going to be building around this, but to me, I think the best use of this is really going to be for dealing with enemies that have retaliate. So if you're going into a scenario and you have a lot of enemies that have retaliate, this is a really nice one to bring, even if you're not playing it as your main augment. It is nice to be able to switch into this when you need to. This could also be a card where if you are newer to Gloomhaven, if you're newer to the Mindthief and you're not really sure how to go about avoiding enemy attacks that well, one thing you could do is you could play Psychic Blade as your main augment, and so that way you can still get your attacks off while you're kind of sitting behind your other melee allies. I think it's going to be a safe way to play, but not necessarily going to be the most effective way to play, because you're going to have other augments that you'd really rather be using. And yeah, you want to be able to just get the most out of your augments. And if you're not using this to avoid the retaliate damage, then I don't know that you're going to get that much value out of this. to make it worth playing over your other augments. But it can also be good for if you have a door jam and you have a bunch of allies and enemies all clumped up around a door. This is nice for being able to still do attacks if you're fighting for that melee space. The bottom action is fine. Move and adding curse to all your attacks is good, but the issue is that you don't really have a lot of abilities that give you multiple melee attacks for a single round. If you have allies who can grant you attacks, then this ability can become much more effective and worth playing. But if you are not consistently getting additional attacks from your allies, then I don't really think that this action is going to be that valuable for you. Next up is Perverse Edge, and it's the first top action we're going to look at that is not an augment. Instead, it is a loss action. It's going to do attack 3, add +2 attack, and gain 1 experience for each negative condition the target has. This infuses dark, and like I said, it's a loss. The bottom action is first ability, consume ice to stun an enemy at range 1 and gain an experience. Then you can do a move 3, and then this is at initiative 8. We'll focus on the bottom action first because it can be an outstanding action, both for the initiative of a card, which I think is just going to give you consistent value for a long time. Initiative 8 is fantastic. It's our best initiative at level 1, and it's our 3rd fastest initiative on the class overall, including level ups. But that bottom action also gives you a source of non-loss stun. You're not going to have a lot of ways of infusing ice, especially at level 1, so it can be hard to do this. But if you can pull it off, being able to stun an enemy and then move is fantastic value for the bottom action of a card. There are definitely times where I would have preferred to have the movement before the stun, but I don't know, I think it's give or take in that some situations you'd rather have the stun first, sometimes you'd rather have the movement first. Either way, great value. That top action has the potential to be an incredibly powerful attack. You know, we could look at like a best case scenario where let's say you're attacking an enemy that has 3 negative conditions on it, so that's getting +6 total damage and +3 experience, so you're doing an attack 9, gain 3 experience. That is a great ceiling for the card, but it is a pretty unrealistic ceiling to be able to hit. And the times where you're able to hit that ceiling, like if you have other allies that can be doing negative conditions, then this becomes a little bit more achievable to be able to maybe play and make it worth the loss action. But at the same time, if you're able to dedicate enough resources to be able to get a ton of negative conditions on the target to be able to make this hit its ceiling, you probably are not going to have that much of a problem with that enemy anyway. So I don't know, it's fine. I think it can be a powerful loss action, but I did not often play this for anything more than just the experience or just trying to see, okay, well, I can afford to play a loss at the end of the scenario. Let's just see how much damage I can do. But overall, it's a great card, if only for the initiative for all Mindthieves. But being able to get that stun is great for every Mindthief. Next, we have Frigid Apparition. Top action is attack 3 and infuse ice. Bottom action is a loss that gives you 2 experience. First ability is move 4, and then you get to do an attack 2 stun and infuse ice, and this is at initiative 10. This is another great initiative card. You can reliably go faster than a lot of enemies with this. And the top attack 3, you have to consider the augments that you're going to have at that time. It could be an attack 4, it could be an attack 3 with poison and muddle. But probably the most notable thing about this card is that it is our only way to infuse ice on a non-loss action. So at least at level 1. So a good attack paired with our most reliable source of infusing ice is a great action. And then with a great repeatable top action, we have a nice loss action at the bottom. Move 4, attack 2, stun, infuse ice. You get some mobility, you get some damage, you get some crowd control with that stun, and you get that ice infusion for setting up for a next turn, and you have this all to great initiative. This is a very solid card. You're going to keep this in your hand for quite a while, I imagine, to be able to have that consistent source of ice infusion. So highly recommend this card regardless of the specialty you are going with. Next up is Empathetic Assault. Top action is a loss, attack 4 at range 5 and disarm, infuse ice, and you get 2 experience for doing this. The bottom action is move 2 and heal 2 self, and this is done at initiative 12. Top action is very powerful. It's an attack 4 at range 5, so you're getting a big attack, you're getting a lot of range at it, you're disarming that enemy. But the caveat is that it is a ranged attack, so it is not going to be benefiting from your from your augments. That disarm does pair nicely with an initiative 12 though, because again, at 12 you're going to be going before a good amount of monsters, and so you can play this card, and then after all the ability cards have been revealed, you're generally going to be going fast enough that you can choose which enemy is going to be doing the most damage that is going to get the most value out of being disarmed. So powerful top loss. However, the bottom I'm less convinced about. Move 2, heal 2 is fine. On the one hand, you can look at that heal 2 as being able to recover a third of your health at level 1, because your health max health pool at level 1 is only 6. But at the same time, you're not going to be getting attacked a lot, so there could be times where you're just going to be at max health anyway, and you're just not really going to benefit from that heal 2. And move 2 is pretty small compared to some of the other moves that you can do. You're going to have a lot of move 3s and move 4s. So I think this card can be worth bringing if you are expecting to face a lot of enemies that have poison and wound especially, where you can just have a reliable way of getting that wound off of yourself. But I think as you start to level up, this can be a card that you consider cutting, because you have other better initiative cards. You have other bottom actions that you're going to want to be doing more consistently through your rest cycles, and the top loss is great, but it just doesn't convince me enough to keep it in my hand for, you know, a long period of time. After like levels 2, 3, 4, something like that, it's probably out of my hand by that point. Next we have Hidden in the Shadows. Top action is attack 3 at advantage. Then the following ability says that the attack ability killed an enemy, perform invisible self. Bottom action is if you have not moved this round, perform invisible self, and then you cannot perform move abilities this round. At the end of the round, lose your invisibility. And this goes at initiative 14. Both halves of this card are outstanding. Being able to do an attack 3 at advantage and then go invisible, yeah, it is worth focusing on an enemy that is low health, that you might be doing a little bit more damage than you need to, just to guarantee that you can kill something and go invisible. You are a low health class, you have some cards that have bottom actions that are attacks, and so being able to go invisible is a very valuable thing, because it prevents you from having to move your way out of enemies, and you can really be thinking about how you set yourself up for the next round with even more damage. 14 is also still a relatively very fast initiative. It's, you know, we're starting to get up there a little bit in our initiatives. So there are monsters that can go faster than this, but 14 is generally fast enough that you can use that for the initiative alone to get you that invisibility early in a round, and then do some initiative weaving to go late in the next round, and that way you're invisible for 2 monster rounds. I will caveat that by saying that, remember that initiative weaving is a tool. Just because you go invisible doesn't mean you should feel obligated to say that I have to go late the next round so that I maximize the invisibility. There were plenty of times that I used this to go invisible, only to go early again the next round, so that way I could help out my allies with trying to deal more damage as quickly as possible, because it would have benefited me personally to be able to stay invisible, but my allies would suffer. This is a big candidate for an early +1 damage to that attack, because you're dealing more damage, but also you're just increasing the odds that you're going to be able to go invisible, and being able to get invisibility out of this reliably once per rest cycle is incredibly useful. All of our Mindthief specialties generally will appreciate this. I guess the control one less so. I mean, everybody can benefit from being invisible, but this is a very powerful card that stayed in my hand all the way up through level 6, and I imagine it would have continued in my hand for some time after that. The bottom action has a different level of effectiveness, because you don't have to kill an enemy to go invisible, but at the same time you're only going invisible for the current round, and you cannot move. So the cannot move, I think, to me was the most limiting factor. I still got a ton of like very good, I had a lot of rounds where I got some good value out of this because I just needed to go invisible and I wasn't sure if I could kill an enemy. But in general, you're probably trying to play this for the top action more than the bottom action. Next we have Scurry. Top action is move 3 and then attack 2. Bottom action is a loot 2, which is a loss and you gain an experience, and this is at initiative 20. Since we have the movement on the top paired with that attack 2, we're going to have a slightly reduced attack ability, but that's okay, because the positioning can be very important for being able to set up your bottom actions where you want to be doing something, but it may not be allowing you to move first. So for instance, this could be used with the bottom of Perverse Edge, where you are not adjacent to an enemy, but you still want to be stunning somebody. Scurry can get you in range, be able to do an attack, then you stun them, and then you can move away. You could also do something like using the bottom of the Mind's Weakness, where you move in, you do an attack 2, maybe you have Withering Claw on you. So that first attack is an attack 2 Poison Muddle, and then you do the bottom of Mind's Weakness, and you turn it into essentially an attack 2 Wound Poison Muddle. If you're attacking the same enemy you attacked before, or you can just do another attack against another adjacent enemy. But if you're doing something like that, you also have to be wary of moving adjacent to multiple enemies that you're not planning on killing that round and making sure that they are not going to kill you. Then if you have this card on you and it makes its way into the last room with you, being able to vacuum up all that loot with a loot 2 is just very nice, as long as you don't have a silent knife in the party with you who has already beaten you to all that loot. Scurry is also just a great card I found for being able to try to get to treasure chests as well, because anytime you have that top movement, it just gives you that extra little speed boost so that you can get to a treasure chest in a far off corner in 1 round as opposed to 2. So at level 1, I highly recommend having this card in your hand, because that movement on the top can be extremely versatile. As you start to get used to it and you find whether you're using it a lot or not, then you can start to decide at later levels if it's worth cutting. But at level 1, it's absolutely worth having in your hand. Next is Submissive Affliction, which has a top action of attack 2, add +1 attack for each negative condition the target has. The bottom action is control 1 enemy within range 4, then do move 1, and if you consume ice, the controlled enemy suffers 2 damage and you gain an experience, and this is at initiative 48. This initiative is going to be pretty unreliable in terms of going before or after enemies. There are some enemies, like Earth Demons, you can still generally go before with this initiative, but you're generally going to be pairing this with another card that is a more reliable initiative, so that you know you're either going to be going before or after enemies. That top action is how the negative condition specialty can try to get some high single target damage up. Even if your target only has poison, this is essentially doing an attack 4 on that target. But ideally you're able to try to do this attack with, 2, maybe 3 negative conditions on it, but even getting 2 negative conditions on an enemy can be a little hard with, not Submissive Affliction, with Withering Claw. You could go late in 1 round and then go early the next round and do the top of Submissive Afflictions that you still have Muddle on that enemy that you're targeting, making this a non-loss attack 5, which that is very strong. I just think that early on it can be tricky to try to stack all the multiple negative conditions for this card. But it can be done. You just have to work a little bit for it. That bottom action, control 1 enemy within range 4 and have them move 1. Fantastic for high shield enemies, because of that, if you consume ice, you can deal that enemy direct 2 damage, bypassing their shield, which can be very good for melting through things like flame demons or forest imps. And being able to move an enemy into a trap is a great action that you can do. I threw a +1 onto this movement and loved it, because anytime there was hazardous terrain in the scenario, where there were traps in the scenario, just became like, okay, now this bottom action is now something that allows me to do direct damage that scales with the scenario level, and I can be bypassing enemy shields with it, assuming that enemy is shielded and not flying. Yeah, I loved this card. I kept this card in my hand for most scenarios, even up through level 6, because I was doing a minor, what am I trying to say? My secondary specialty was controlling enemies, and I found this action to be incredibly powerful for controlling enemies, especially with that +1 movement. If you're going to be leaning into that control enemy specialty, I highly recommend taking this card and enhancing it with the +1 movement, because it is cheap and powerful. I have not played with the negative condition specialty, so I can't really speak to how easy or hard it is to really get a ton of damage out of the top of Submissive Affliction. I imagine it's going to be very easy to make it an attack 4, but trying to get up to an attack 5 or 6 is a little bit harder. So if you are a negative condition specialty or you're the control specialty, you are probably going to be taking this card into your hand. If you are neither of those, then you may not be taking this card, because you're not going to be taking it for the initiative. Next, we have Pilfer. Top action is attack 2. If this attack does not kill the target, gain a money token and then perform loot 1. Then the bottom action is a move 4, and this is at initiative 79. We talked about the Mindthief having good initiative, and up until this point, you've probably been thinking, Emerging Boat, what the hell? This is not good initiative, or this is not good mobility. We don't have a lot of good movement. What are you talking about? But from this card on is when we're going to start to see those really good movement cards with some of the move 4 and move 3. And if you were the summon build, because we will be getting into that summon specialty as we get into the level X cards, this is probably going to be your most reliable source of movement because those other move 4s are on cards you are going to be playing for the top actions. So especially for the summon specialty, you're probably going to be looking at this card as a very enticing option for that movement. Additionally, this is the second latest initiative that the Mindthief gets. So in terms of trying to do some kind of initiative weaving and trying to go late one round and then early the next round, this is going to be a nice card for being able to do that. And so that paired with a big move makes it very effective for being able to do that. The top action is nice for trying to be able to clean up some money tokens in a room. You're basically guaranteeing that you're at least going to get a money token out of this, because even if you don't kill the enemy, you're going to get one money token out of it. If you do kill the enemy, then you're going to loot the token that it drops, as well as any other tokens that may be nearby when you did that attack. This is another card where it can be very nice for trying to get treasure chests that are in far off corners, because you can just move up one round, and in that same round you can do the top action of Pilfer to be able to just loot the adjacent chest. So solid card. Depending on what other cards you take and what specialty you're doing, this may stay in your hand for the movement. Otherwise, it could become a quick cut if you prefer to keep other ability cards that have good movement on them. For our first X card, we have our last augment that is available at level 1, and that is Feedback Loop. After each of your melee attack abilities, grant one of your summons attack +0. Then after you play this augment, you get to do an attack 2 and then grant one of your summons movement +0. This gives you 1 experience, and as all augments are, it is persistent. The bottom action is a move 4 jump, and if you end this movement in the same hex as you started, all enemies move through gain muddle, and the initiative is a measly 51. So unreliable initiative, but that's not why we take it. It is an excellent card for movement. We'll talk about that first because I'm excited to talk about the augment. But move 4 jump is amazing, specifically because our other move 4s at level 1 do not have the ability to enhance them with jump. So this can be a great card for any Mindthief to bring with them if they need a lot of mobility in a scenario. And then let's talk about that augment, because that augment is what makes the summon build or the summon specialty just really, really fun with the potential for damage. Our summon at level 1, because we do only have access to one summon for quite some time, but that summon does do poison when it attacks. So on your turn, your summon is going to go first, attack an enemy for attack 2 poison, then you can do Feedback Loop to do your own attack on that poisoned enemy, giving +1 to your attack. Then after your attack, you can have your summon maybe attack that same enemy and just continue stacking the damage. Maybe it attacks another enemy and does poison to that other enemy, on top of whatever damage it's going to deal from its attack 2. It's a lot. It is very, very fun. It is also very fun if you have allies that can grant you attacks. Because every time they grant you an attack, they are also granting your summon an attack as well. Not directly, but indirectly. There are definitely some downsides to the summon specialty, and I will talk about those more when we talk about the summon, but this card overall, it is a core card for the summon specialty, and if you are not the summon specialty, it is still a great card overall just for that movement. But on to the next card. That next card is Possession. The top action says control one enemy within range 4 and have them do an attack 3 with muddle. The bottom action is move 3 and grant one of your summons move 2, and this is at initiative 71. The top action is obviously very appealing to a Mindthief that's going to be going for the control specialty. That attack 3 is the strongest control ability that we've had so far. It is paired with muddle, so it's a little defensive as well as being offensive. And something that I haven't talked about with these control abilities that are attacks is that they do get the abilities if an enemy has any kind of inherent trait, like maybe they do wound with their attacks or poison with their attacks, that control attack does inherit that ability. The other thing that I failed to mention, which is something that I use to control attacks for a lot, was using that control attack to have one monster attack another monster that has retaliate, because then you're just doing additive damage there, where you have you're dealing direct damage with the attack, and then you're getting attack on that other enemy that you're attacking with because it's being retaliated against. Very effective. That bottom action is going to be very important for your summon build, your summon specialties, especially if you're trying to be able to make sure that your summon is not dying. Granting your summon movement so that you can control it is very, very useful. You can either get your summon out of a position where it is just going too far into enemy territory, or you can try to position it in a way that you're going to get more value out of feedback loop. So overall, very good card for our control and summon specialties. And our last level X card is Gnawing Horde. Finally, we're getting to our summon. When I've been talking about the summon specialty, the very last card that I'm talking about is the summon itself. The top action is the Rat Swarm. It has 5 health, it has 2 movement, it has 2 attack, and like I mentioned before, it does poison on each of its attacks. You get 2 experience for this. It is a persistent loss card. The bottom action is a move 4, and this is at your latest initiative of Initiative 82. It goes without saying that this is a core card for the summon specialty. We already talked about how the summon specialty can be extremely powerful with feedback loop, with how much damage you can be doing, with the extra poison that you can be getting out. It is a very, very cool build. The downside of it is that you are relying on being able to keep your Gnawing Horde alive. It is a loss card, so if you lose it, you're not getting it back unless an ally has some way of being able to get a lost card back into your hand, which is not common. It does have a decent amount of health, like 5 health is not too bad. However, you don't really have ways of being able to heal the summon. So unless you have allies that can help heal the summon or help provide ways to be able to keep your summon safe, it can be hard to keep this alive. If you are new to Gloomhaven, it might be hard to get the hang of the summon specialty, because it does really rely on you having a good knowledge and mastery over how summons are going to move, so all the monster movement rules and everything. But the payoff is very good for it. The bottom action being a move 4, like I said, is another really good movement card. Our other movement cards, I would say, are maybe a little bit better, because feedback loop has the jump with it, while Pilfer also has the flexibility, that top action that can loot. But even if you're not planning on focusing on the summon specialty, this is still a fine card to take for movement, and at the end of the scenario, when you don't really need the movement as much, maybe then you drop the Gnawing Horde and you don't really care as much if it dies. You're just looking to get a few attacks out of it, getting some poison out there, and just get that experience. If you're looking for a recommendation on cards to cut at level 1 and you're new to the Mindthief, I would recommend just not using the level X cards. This is probably going to be something that I recommend for a lot of builds, just to start off and try to get a feel for the class. Just use the level 1 cards. If you know you want to be doing the summon specialty, then you want to include all of these cards. But I think crafting that level 1 hand, again, is really just going to be thinking about, find one primary specialty that you want to be doing, and then find that secondary specialty and think about how you want to be kind of switching between those. You want to be starting off trying to get into that primary specialty, doing that as much as possible, and then finding those opportunities to switch into that secondary specialty. I think if you think of it in those terms, building the hand around it will feel more natural. Our first option at level 2 is Hostile Takeover. The top action is an attack 2 at range 4 and immobilize, and you infuse ice. The bottom action is a round loss. It gives you 2 experience. And it says, place a character token on a normal or elite enemy within range 4. This round, during that enemy's turn, it treats its enemies as allies and its allies as enemies, with you controlling its abilities. This infuses dark, and all of this is at initiative 9. For the top, an attack that immobilizes at such a big range at range 4 is a great card to do as a room opener. When your party is moving in, opening a room, you can get this attack off, be almost guaranteed to be able to do this attack. Immobilize an enemy so you help out whoever's doing that room opening, and you infuse ice for your next round. The fact that this infuses ice is probably one of the most alluring parts of this card, especially at earlier levels, because you only have one card that consistently infuses ice. So being able to add another card to your hand that can infuse ice is a very nice bonus. Even if you're not using this on a round where you're opening a new room, the fact that it goes at such an early initiative is a great thing to pair with that top ability, because you can have all the monsters draw their ability cards, and then when it becomes your turn, you can make a wiser decision on which enemy you're immobilizing to decide, okay, which enemy am I going to get the most value out of immobilizing? Who's going to be trying to do the most damage? It is a shame that this is a ranged attack for the sake of not being able to use your augments, but it is such a nice tool that has the ice infusion with it that we don't mind having this as something that isn't necessarily going to be like the most powerful attack because it's powered up by our augments. Or not powered up by our augments, rather. That bottom action, I am a sucker for just cool, fun loss abilities, and this is a cool and fun loss ability, basically being able to control an enemy for one turn. Again, it is nice that this is part of a low initiative card, so that way you don't have to try to play another fast card just to pair it with this ability because you need to be going fast for this. But it represents both damage mitigation and damage done, and it scales really well with scenario level because this is going to be doing the monster's normal attack that we'd be doing anyway. So if you're playing on higher level difficulties and you're having to deal with monsters that are dealing more damage, well, you can now turn that a little bit against them. So overall, repeatable top action with a fun, powerful loss action to play late in a scenario. Always a good pattern to see. Our other option is Fearsome Blade. The top action is a attack 2, push 2, and curse. And if you consume ice, then you add an additional 2 attacks. So this becomes an attack 4, push 2, and curse. And you get an experience. Bottom action is wound at range 1 and then move 4. And this is all at initiative 27. That top action is a very powerful non-loss attack if you are able to consume ice. If you're playing the Mind's Weakness, that's an attack 5 and push 2 and curse. I think like the best case scenario for that is that you attack, the attack doesn't kill the enemy, so you're able to get that curse off, and then you're able to push the enemy into trap or hazardous terrain or something like that and kill it. But even if you can't kill it, it's great if you can try to push an enemy away that is not going to be moving, so that way you can prevent some damage. So those are good ways to be able to use this card to try to maximize it. The bottom action is nice for the negative condition specialty. However, it's a little awkward in my opinion because there might be a lot of cases where you want to try to use this to maybe set up something like Submissive Affliction so you get more negative conditions on a target to increase the damage you're about to do to it. But if you do that, then you're going to have to remain adjacent to the target after you do the wound, so you're not going to be using the move 4, or you're going to be underusing it. And maybe you're pivoting around the enemy, but you're not moving completely away from it. And this card is kind of early, but especially if you're using it for that bottom action, you're probably going to want to try to go a little bit earlier so you can make sure that you're wounding the enemy before its turn, so that wound still ticks for this round. And 27 isn't always going to be reliable enough to do that. So it is a tad bit awkward, and I think it'd be a lot more forgiving of that bottom action if it was the reversed order where you could move 4 and then wound 1. So overall, this card has potential, especially that top action can be a very high-powered attack. The negative condition specialty may get a lot of value out of that bottom action. But early on, I just don't think you're going to have enough ice infusion sources, especially if you're playing the Mindthief at an early part of your campaign where you are not going to be starting with a lot of levels. You're not going to be having a lot of items that can help with element infusion. If you have allies or you have items that can help to infuse that ice and you think you'll have that more reliably available to you, then I think this becomes a little bit more of an enticing card. Or if you're much later into your campaign and you're going to be starting off with a few levels under your belt, then you can kind of plan around your ice infusion abilities, and you don't really need to take this card for the other ice infusion. But yeah, let me just jump into the discussion here. For which to pick, I generally prefer taking Hostile Takeover at this level. Like I was just saying while talking about Fearsome Blade, if you are starting off if you're later in the campaign and you can be starting off at maybe like level 3, maybe even level 4, although that's very late in the campaign. But at level 4, you'll get more cards that have some reliable ice and infusion on them. So if you can stand to not have the extra ice infusion that you would get from Hostile Takeover, then Fearsome Blade can be useful to take. But until you get that other source of ice infusion, it's going to be hard to maximize Fearsome Blade. Unless, of course, you have other characters, other items, those kinds of things that can help you reliably have ice for that card. So I would base this level up less so on the specialties you're thinking about running for your Mindthief, and I would focus more on how late do you think you're going to be going into the Mindthief levels. Like if you think you're going to be going just into maybe level 5, level 6 and retiring at that point, I would probably prefer to take Hostile Takeover because I think that ice infusion you're going to get early on is going to be really nice for you. But if you think you're going to be taking the Mindthief into much later levels, then you can probably afford to take Fearsome Blade here. But if you're going to take Fearsome Blade, I would look ahead to kind of plan out your build a little bit more to make sure that you're going to have other sources of ice infusion to be able to make this work. But Hostile Takeover is also just a safe choice here. Our first card at level 3 is Cranium Overload. Top action is designate a hex an enemy. Oh my gosh, let me start that over. Designate a hex containing an enemy within range 4 to perform attack 6, target the enemy in the designated hex, pierce 5. Then the following ability says, if the attack ability killed an enemy, perform attack 2, targeting all enemies adjacent to the designated hex. This is a loss action, you get 2 experience for it. The bottom action is much simpler for me to say, it's a move 5 jump, and this is all at initiative 5. This is your fastest initiative card that you're going to get with Mindthief. It's also your biggest single movement that you're going to get, and it has a jump on it. That movement can be enhanced with a +1. It can be enhanced with an element like Nice Infusion if you have a lot of cash laying around. So nice big movements at very fast initiatives are always really good. This card will get you where you want to go. That top action is a really powerful loss. This is obviously going to be more powerful the more enemies you have in a scenario, so higher parties with higher number of characters will benefit from this a little bit more because it's going to be easier to find clusters of enemies where you can maybe target, one enemy with that first ability and then 2 to 4 enemies with that second ability. Plus, these are all treated as melee attacks, so all of these attacks will benefit from your augments. And while it is a loss action, this is one of the few actions that you have that can give you multi-targeted melee attacks this early on. Our second card is Brain Leech. The top action is control 1 enemy within range 4, move 2, attack 2, and if you consume ice, you can add wound to that attack. You also get an experience with it. The bottom action is attack 1, and then if you perform the attack ability, perform Strengthen Self, and this is all at initiative 21. Anytime you see Strengthen Self on the bottom of a card, you should perk up your attention a little bit. Strengthening Self on the bottom of a card is nice because it allows you to strengthen yourself for the top action of your current turn, as well as still being strengthened for your next turn as well. They were obviously very intentional with how they ordered the attack and the strengthening here because you do not benefit from strengthen for that first attack on the bottom half of the card. But this attack 1 is usually really going to be an attack 2 from Mind's Weakness, or it's going to be attack 1 Poison Muddle from Withering Claw. That makes the bottom of this very nice to pair with the top of Submissive Affliction, because if you are running that negative condition build, the top of Submissive Affliction now becomes an attack 5 at advantage. But really, any Mindthief is going to benefit from bottom attacks because you are going to get more value out of your augments from it. But we also should not sleep on that top action where we can control 1 enemy and have them move and attack. An attack 2 that doesn't benefit from your augments, that's not great, but we'll keep going back to these things that you can get from doing these control attacks or the control abilities where you have movement here. You can move that enemy through traps. You have an attack. You can have that enemy attack a monster that has retaliate. So that way you're damaging that retaliate monster and you're damaging the monster you're controlling. On top of all that, you can also position this monster, the one that you're controlling, in a way that can help out another ally's AoE, or just get them into a position that would be beneficial for another ally to attack them. Overall, I just really like both halves of this card. I think in some cases you need some planning to be able to get the most out of it, because you need to be planning about how you maximize that control ability if you're using it for the top, whether you're moving an enemy through traps or attacking a retaliate enemy. And then for that bottom, because you don't have any movement on there, you do need to have planned ahead the previous round to make sure that you are going to be able to get into position, or you're using Scurry. But I don't love pairing Scurry with this card because then you are not getting the full benefit of that bottom strengthen. Not a big deal, but ideally you can plan for the bottom of Brain Leech in the round before, so that way you can still use the strengthen for the top of your other card this round. As for which card to take, in most cases, I would try to push for Brain Leech just because I think it is such a good card for your negative condition specialty and your mind's weakness specialty for that +1 single target damage. That bottom attack with Strengthen is just really nice for that. You're going to get more out of those augments. Same thing with the Summon build. You're going to get another attack that you can use on the bottom action that will allow you to have your Summon attack again. That is just going to continue to stack up those multiple sources of attacks and being able to go through your modifiers. Then for the control specialty, Brain Leech top is also just fantastic because it's our first card that has move and attack. That being said, there were definitely scenarios where I really would have loved to have an AoE type attack like the top of Cranium Overload towards the end of a scenario with the Mindthief, just because sometimes I just needed another character that had some of that AoE potential. Being able to pop that in the last room and just, maybe kill one enemy with that top attack and then get some bunch of extra little attacks with the second ability on it, like that would just be amazing. And you have consistent move from the bottom action. I wouldn't fault you for going either way here, but I generally lean towards Brain Leech for most of the specialties and builds. At level 4, we have Frozen Shiv. Top action is an attack 4, Pierce 1, Infuse Ice. Bottom action is a loss. It is attack 3, then move 3, then attack 3, and infuse ice, and you get 2 experience for doing this. And this is at initiative 16. This top action is basically just a total upgrade to Frigid Apparition top, where we're getting +1 attack and we're getting +1 pierce. We're still maintaining that ice infusion. So it is just upgrading a card that was already something that was a kind of a staple in our rotation for that ice. Meanwhile, that bottom action is a very nice loss, being able to do potentially like an attack 4, move 3, attack 4, or attack 3, poison muddle, move 3, attack 3, poison muddle, or doing that with feedback loop and being able to get multiple extra attacks out of your summon. It is very, very good. I don't have much more to say about this card other than it's basically just a direct upgrade to Frigid Apparition. The initiative is slightly worse, but it's not too much worse. 16 is still pretty fast. Our second card is Silent Scream. Top action is actually an augment. It's the first augment that we're getting as part of our level ups. And it says, after each of your melee attack abilities, perform heal 2 at range 2. Then you get to do an attack to disarm, so you'll get to heal from this attack. The bottom action is control one enemy within range 4 and do an attack -1 and infuse ice, and this is all at initiative 83. This is our latest initiative so far, just by a hair, though there will be one card that has a later initiative in a later level up. The top action of this is a nice augment, and then it's kind of like a support augment. I will say that most Mindthieves probably are not going to want to switch to this. Like if you are the single target melee damage build or you're the negative condition build, you're probably going to be hard pressed to want to switch to Silent Scream unless you're really okay with going into more of a support thing. Where I think you're really going to want to use this card is for the summon focus specialty. This is a great way where, we start off a room using the top of feedback loop, and then after a couple of rounds, after our summon has taken some damage, then we can switch to Silent Scream and just make sure that we can keep it topped off on healing before we go into the next room. It is a little limiting in the fact that it's like you still have to have a target to attack to actually be able to get value out of the healing, so that's why you don't want to wait too late in the room. But being able to get a disarm out of this too when you play it is really nice. The disarm can be a little odd to play with the late initiative just because you're disarming that enemy for the next round, and so you want to be somewhat confident that it's going to be an enemy that you think is going to be attacking the next round, and you're kind of guessing at that. But it's not a huge drawback. You can always pair this with an early initiative if you really want to, but the late initiative can be valuable on its own. That bottom action, control one enemy within range 4, attack -1. This is the first control ability control attack ability, I should say, that scales with scenario level. This gives you a different reason to be selective in terms of which enemy you're controlling to control, because before we've talked about, I'm going to control one enemy to attack another enemy that has retaliate or something like that. In this case, you're going to be incentivized to control the enemy that can do the most damage, but that enemy still has to already be adjacent to another one of your enemies so that you can actually get that attack off because it's not tied to any movement. However, if you are leaning into the control abilities, then you probably also took Brain Leech at level 3, in which case you can pair the bottom of Silent Scream with the top of Brain Leech and still get some of that movement into play so you get 2 enemies adjacent to each other and you can just have them duke it out. If you do that pairing, it is also nice that you can consume the ice for the top of Breen Leech, and then you are just going to be reinfusing it anyway with the bottom of Silent Scream. So overall, really like this card, have a lot of good things to say about it. As for which card to take, I think this is a fun choice because I think this is where your specialty choice is really going to start to influence the cards that you're taking here. If you are focused on summons or you are focused on controlling enemies, Silent Scream is a great card to take. Before I actually, so some context, I actually have taken both of these cards because, like I mentioned before, I played the Mindthief up through level 6. I respect my Mindthief, I think at level, was it at level 5 or level 6? But I respect from a melee focused single target damage dealer into a summon focus with control focus minor. So in my first pass, I took Frozen Shiv. In my second pass, I took Silent Scream. I had undervalued the healing that Silent Scream could do, and after I started playing the summon focus, I really started to see the value in it being able to keep the health of my summon topped off. Even though I had other people in my party who could potentially do healing, it was just nice for me to be able to have that control myself to say like, okay, I don't need the extra attacks from Feedback Loop. I'm going to switch and start getting some extra healing out. And in some cases, I actually used that healing to heal my teammates and get some wound off of them, I think in what scenario, I won't give scenario spoilers. And then obviously for the control specialty, we really like that attack that can actually scale with enemy level, and it's an attack that we can do as a bottom action that infuses ice. That's a really nice thing to have for control. For the damage focus or for the negative effect focus, I would just take Frozen Shiv. In most cases, you're probably just replacing Frigid Apparition with this card, so that way you have a little bit of a better attack. And we always like that. I mean, the negative condition specialty isn't really getting a lot out of this, but you're still just making a core card in your rotation better because it's something that you use for the ice infusions. However, if you took Fearsome Blade instead of Hostile Takeover at level 2, I could actually see you taking Frozen Shiv and running that together with Frigid Apparition, at least for now. So that way you are now getting your second consistent source of ice infusion. Level 5, we have Mass Hysteria up first. The top action is Attack 1, Target 4, Range 4, Pierce 3, Muddle, Infuse Ice. The bottom action is Move 3, Jump, and then all enemies move through gain Poison, and this infuses Dark. And this is at Initiative 11. Yes, Attack 1 on a level 5 card feels very paltry, especially because it is not going to be benefiting from your augments. But do not underestimate the top of Mass Hysteria. It is extremely strong, especially if you are strengthened and you have a way to get yourself strengthened. The fact that this is Pierce 3 on it is just begging to be played with high shield, low health enemies. And you get to target 4 enemies. 4 enemies! You have perks that can allow you to get attack modifier cards that have invisibility on them. And this is a card that can now allow us to let that happen somewhat consistently. Because especially if you're doing this strengthened, you're drawing at least 8 attack modifier cards. This is just such a powerful action. If you take this card, this is also probably going to be one of your new room opener cards, where you can now just get 4 sources of muddle off. So whoever's opening that room, maybe it's you, whoever's opening that room is going to be a little bit more protected because you're going to be muddling most of the enemies that are going to be able to get into the doorway. And then you're also infusing ice for your next round. The bottom action is also very repeatable. It's a move 3 jump, and you get to poison all enemies that you move through. I mean, now this means that unless you're using something that gives you like boots of +1 movement, or anything that gives you extra movement, you're only really going to be poisoning 2 enemies at most with this. But if you're able to get more movement out of it, maybe you can poison 3 enemies. And the fact that you're infusing Dark is potentially going to be nice depending on which cards you take at later levels. This is an excellent, excellent card. Do not be turned away from the attack 1s on the top, because they are more than that. You have a good modifier deck. Competing for our love at level 5 is Gangling Abomination. The top action is our first summon that we're getting as a part of our level ups. Finally, a new toy for our summon specialty. The summon is the Rat Monstrosity. It has 8 health, move 3, attack 3, and add +1 attack if the target has a negative condition. It is a summon, so you get 2 experience for it. It is a persistent card, and it is a lost card. If the summon dies, it's lost. The bottom action is a move 2 and attack 2, and this is at initiative 81. Obviously, the main candidate for this card is going to be the summon specialty, because you start looking at that summon and I think you start to wonder, well, obviously it has amazing synergy with our first summon, because our first summon can be applying poison to the enemies, and then our rat monstrosity here can come in and we turn that attack 3 basically into an attack 5. And the question that I wondered when I was looking at this card, and that spurred me to want to do the summon build myself, was, is it reasonable to run both summons for this build at the same time? And in my opinion, the answer is yes. I did a few scenarios where I would start off, you want to summon that level 1 summon first, the Rat Swarm, because summoning it first will make sure that it attacks before this summon, so you're making sure that the poison gets applied to the enemies first. So usually what I would do is that in the first rest cycle, I would not summon this card. I would only summon our level 1 summon, and then in the next rest cycle is when I would get out the Gangling Abomination, or our Rat Monstrosity here. And spacing it out like that, it helped a little bit with endurance. It also helped me get a little bit of confidence that, like, if something went terribly wrong in the first room, I wasn't going to just lose both of my summons outright. And it also helped me to kind of space out that the downtime, because I didn't want to spend 2 rounds in a row just summoning with the Mindthief. I wanted to get a summon out and then start focusing on how can I get damage out to keep my summon safe. Anyway, that strategy seemed to be pretty effective to me. And that's also where I started valuing that Silent Scream card a lot more, is because having that out gave me the confidence that I could keep my summons alive, which is very important, because if you lose these summons, well, that really sucks. Especially if you play both of these summons and then they both die, you have just really tanked your endurance. You do have a secondary specialty that you should hopefully be able to rely on, but it's going to be hard to rely on that for long because you have really leaned into that summon specialty. But the highs for that are so high, it's so good. You know, you can be doing an attack 5 on this Rat Monstrosity's turn, and then you can be using Feedback Loop to get even more attacks out. It does take a fair amount of planning and a good understanding of monster movement and all that to be able to make this build work effectively, because there are a lot of times where you can just get yourself set up where your summons just don't move into the right positions, and then the order of attacking just doesn't work out, or your summons are attacking different things and then you have to try to reposition them. So it is a relatively high skill build to be able to make it work well, but like I said, the highs are very high with it. But this card is not just for summon specialty, because that bottom action is extremely good. It's another attack 2 on the bottom of a card, but this time we have movement with it. So we're doing move and then attack. That's an action that any Mindthief is going to really like, because it's a bottom attack that's going to allow you to get your augment uses out, and it's getting you into position where you can just be doing some nicer attacks. Anytime we can be doing multiple melee attacks in a single turn, Mindthieves are generally going to really like that. As for which to pick, I'll start with the summon specialty. Obviously, summon specialty should take Gangling Abomination, because that is an excellent summon to have. But for every other Mindthief, this gets a little bit trickier. I think if you are really enjoying using the Mind's weakness and having that augment out, then I think I would just go with Gangling Abomination. That bottom attack is going to be great. But at the same time, the top of Mass Hysteria is just such a phenomenal action. And I think that this is where you need to have some strategy for planning your build, because to me, what it came down to was, it's hard for me to want to take Hostile Takeover at level 2 and then also take Mass Hysteria at level 5, because in that case, we now have 2 of our 10 cards have top actions that are not melee. They're not benefiting from our augments. So if you're planning your build and you really want to take Mass Hysteria, then this is a situation where early on I might want to take Fearsome Blade at level 2, just because I'm planning to take this ranged attack of Mass Hysteria at level 5. It's not going to break anything if you decide to take both of these cards. If you take Hostile Takeover and Mass Hysteria, you're going to be infusing a lot of ice. They're both great actions. If you're a control build and you're just really not focusing on augments at all, like if you're just really fully invested in those control abilities, then maybe you do want to take both of these ranged attacks, because you're generally going to be controlling it ranged. Both of these are ranged for attacks, so you could lean into that a little bit more. So control specialty, I'd probably lean towards Mass Hysteria. Negative condition specialty, really, I could go either way. I think it feels like you initially want to jump towards Mass Hysteria bottom to be able to be poisoning a lot of enemies, but at the same time, you're already going to be applying a lot of poison because you have Withering Claw out. So maybe you don't value that poison as much because you already have consistent source of it, and you really want to be able to have that bottom attack from Gangling Abomination. So for the negative condition specialty, I could see you taking either of these. Both of these are very, very, very good. The first card at level 6 is Telepathic Command. Top action is grant one of your summons attack +0, then go invisible, targeting self. The bottom action is a move 4, and then grant one of your summons move 4, and this is at initiative 17. This card is very clearly focused on the summon specialty. And it is a very welcome card for the summon specialty, because having your summon go invisible is a great way to be able to keep them alive. Up until this point, you really only had ways to make yourself go invisible, or if your summon just happened to draw the attack modifier that could allow them to go invisible. Yeah, this is a nice consistent source of invisibility, and it is unlike your source of invisibility from your attack hidden in the shadows at level 1, because it doesn't depend on killing the enemy. The bottom action is also amazing for the summoner. Being able to move 4 and then grant one of your summons move 4 is fantastic. This could be very important if you are playing with both summons, and if you do not enhance your level 1 summon Rat Swarm with a +1 movement, it can start to lag behind a little bit. I think having that +1 movement on that summon is a really important thing. I probably should have talked about that when I was talking about that card. But if you don't have the money to be able to afford that enhancement, this is a good way to be able to try to make sure that that summon is not lagging behind and getting left behind in rooms while your Rat Monstrosity is just moving along. Then that initiative 17 is great for the summon specialty, because your last couple of level up cards have been very late initiative, so a 17 initiative card is pretty welcome for your hand. Our other level 6 card is Dark Frenzy. The top action is attack 3, and then you can consume Ice to add +2 and gain an experience. You can also consume Dark to add another 2 attack and gain an experience. So you can, at total, if you consume both Ice and Dark, you can make this an attack 7, gain 2 experience, non-loss. The bottom action is move 3, and then control 2 enemies within range 4, move 1. If you consume Ice, then the controlled enemies suffer 1 damage and you gain an experience, and this is at initiative 39. At this point, you should have pretty consistent ways of being able to infuse Ice, so making that top attack an attack 5 should be the bare minimum you want to be doing. You don't really have many ways of infusing Dark just yet. If you took Mass Hysteria at level 5, you do have the bottom action there to be able to use the Dark on that. However, it's also going to be hard to say that you want to use the bottom action of that over the top of Mass Hysteria, because the top is just so excellent. We will get a couple of ways to be able to infuse Dark at later levels, but you may also just want to consider trying to get a Dark Infusion enhancement on a card if you can afford it. Because being able to make this a non-loss attack 7 is pretty excellent. The bottom action, honestly, I'm not quite as sold on. Obviously, the control specialty would love to have another control ability. But what makes it tough for me is that because I think it's really valuable to throw the +1 movement enhancement on the bottom of Submissive Affliction, so you can have one enemy move 2 spaces, I kind of view the bottom of Dark Frenzy to be a little bit of a downgrade of that. It is nice that you can do movement ahead of time, and you are doubling the number of enemies that you're controlling with that forced movement. But I also don't really like that you just can't enhance the movement on this card. You're also splitting that 2 damage across 2 different enemies instead of having 2 damage to 1 enemy. So I don't know. I think there is a lot of creativity that you can get going with this card, but I think until I play with it, I'm gonna view it as I just don't value it as much until I would be able to get a chance to play with it and see how it feels. The ceiling of it, though, is that you end up moving 2 enemies into traps, or you bring multiple enemies into a position where now an ally can do a nice AoE. So that is some of the ceiling that you could see with this card. I just don't know how consistently you could hit that ceiling. And then Initiative 39 is not great. You have enough really good initiative cards that I don't think you're going to be too bothered by it, but you're definitely not taking this card because of the initiative. As for what to take, the summon specialty is very clearly taking Telepathic Command. If you're not messing around with summons, then you're probably just not going to care at all about that card. If you're really focused on the high damage single target attacks, then you can take Dark Frenzy and be able to try to find a way to be able to infuse Dark, maybe with an enhancement. Maybe you're throwing a Dark Infusion onto either Frozen Shiv or Frigid Apparition, so that way you're generating both Ice and Dark with one action. But for you, being able to do a non-loss attack 7 is, well, actually it's going to be an attack 8 if you're going to have the Mind's Weakness out. That is just, that's freaking awesome. With the control specialty, I would say you're probably just going to take Dark Frenzy because it has that nice control bottom, and you'll still benefit from being able to do that top attack. Because even if you're not using it for the control, yeah, you have other things that you want to be doing. I'd just be curious to know which card you'd be kicking out to make room for Dark Frenzy. And then for the negative condition build or specialty, if you took Gangling Abomination at level 5, I could see you going back for Mass Hysteria at level 5. Or really for any build, if you took Gangling Abomination at level 5 and you're not really sure that you want either of these cards, I could see it being reasonable to go back for the other level 5 card. But also, let me know if I'm really undervaluing the bottom of Dark Frenzy. I'm very curious on what other people's opinions on that are. At level 7, our first card is Domination. Top action is control 2 enemies within range 4 that are adjacent to each other and have them perform attack 3. The bottom action is a persistent card that says you may have 2 augments active at once. If you play a third augment, you must discard either of the other 2. If you discard this card and you have 2 active augments, you must discard 1. And this is at Initiative 13. So that initial caveat that I said with augments where you can only have 1 active at any given time, obviously this level 7 card allows you to break that rule. You will have to be very cognizant of the how you're rotating out your augments, because you're going to have to be dismissing them at good times to make sure that you cannot afford to have Domination and 2 augments active all the time. That's 3 of your 10 cards. That would be a huge hit to your endurance, and so you'd be encouraged to, at the very least, being cycling out Domination and at least 1 of your augments. That being said, having multiple augments active at any given time is enticing for almost any Mindthief build, especially as we start to see some of these other augments that we can get at these last couple of levels. The top action is also very good. You're getting 2 attack 3s. You do have the requirement of having 2 enemies that are adjacent to each other. You also want to make sure that neither of these enemies is low health, or at least one of them is not low health, because you don't want to kill an enemy with the first attack, because then you're having the effectiveness of this. So I would recommend using this earlier in a room rather than later, just because you're more likely to be able to get the most value out of it. And it's just a lot of fun to be able to have 2 enemies hit each other. And again, that is an action that pairs really well with its own initiative, because you want to be trying to do that a little bit earlier in a round so that you can predict, you'll at least be confident that enemies are going to be near each other, because if you try to wait for it to be towards the end of the round, enemies might move, things might not be where you expect them to be. So doing this at the beginning of a round where you have the information available to you is very nice. Our other card is Psychic Projection. The top action is another augment. It says add +1 attack to your melee attacks for each negative condition the target has. That effect sounds familiar. And then you also get to do a pull 2 at range 3 and attack 3, and like all augments, you get experience for this. The bottom action is designate an unoccupied hex within range 4. Then do an attack 3 and perform this attack as though you occupy the designated hex. And this is infusing Dark and going at Initiative 92, which is our latest initiative across the whole class. This level 7 card really wants to be paired with the other level 7 card so that we can run this augment from Psychic Projection together with Withering Claw, so that way we can be applying poison and muddle a bunch of enemies, and then also basically being able to get the effect of Submissive Affliction added to all of our attacks. At this point in your level ups, you're probably not also running Submissive Affliction. I imagine if you take Psychic Projection, maybe it's just completely replacing Submissive Affliction, or you've already replaced it. But I think it'd also be pretty funny to be able to like have this augment going at the same time as playing Submissive Affliction, so that for each negative condition a target has, you are now adding +2 attack, which is just fun. But I will talk about that augment a little bit more as I'm talking about which card to pick. For this bottom action, Designate a Hex within range 4, you're basically being able to do a melee attack at range, which is pretty cool. You're able to add your augment abilities to this, and you're getting a way to infuse Dark, which is super welcome if you took Dark Frenzy at level 6, and potentially enticing for future levels as well. One benefit that you might have of having this bottom action paired with that really late initiative is that you're not as worried about a monster consuming that dark on the same round that you create it. That's always a risk with infusing elements too early. If you're infusing that element early and then planning to use it the next round, there's always the risk that a monster may consume that element. It is going to depend on the monsters that are in that scenario, obviously, but in this case, it can be nice where you're just not worried about that at all. You go early the next round, and you will know that you have that element available to you. As for which card to take, if you are going with the summon specialty, you probably are going to steer clear from Domination, because I would find it pretty hard, unless you're only running one summon. I think it'd be very hard to be using the bottom ability of Domination to run multiple augments. You already have 1 to 2 summons out on top of one augment, so you're already very limited on the amount of cards that you can play. I don't know that you're going to want to afford trying to cycle in and out Domination when you already have a bunch of other cards that you want to be bringing with you. And for the summoner, or really any Mindthief that is trying to use your augments, the bottom action of Psychic Projection is just very nice for being able to get more charges of your augment out. And in the case of the summoner, it means that you can do a melee attack without having to be adjacent to the enemy. And at this point, your summons have probably also moved up to an enemy, so you can get a charge of feedback loop out with this attack. For the control specialty, you probably go with the top of Domination, just because it's another control ability. You're getting multiple attacks with it. For the pure single target damage specialty, you're probably going with the bottom of Psychic Projection. Well, you're taking the entire card of Psychic Projection, but you are really going to benefit from being able to have a source of Dark Infusion for powering up Dark Frenzy. Similarly, you actually could benefit from that Dark Infusion if you are the control build for a later card that we'll come across. For the negative condition build, I think you're really going to want both of these level 7 cards, because it is going to be very enticing to be able to run both, not Submissive Affliction, Withering Claw alongside of Psychic Projection. So that way you can deal out a bunch of attacks with negative conditions, while also then just piling on top of that and dealing extra damage based on those conditions. If you have played a build like that, I am very curious for you to chime in though, because I could also see a situation where that almost gets awkward, because that first attack that you're doing is not going to benefit from those negative conditions, and so you are really having to wait until that second attack to get the benefit of Psychic Projection. And then in that case, I start to wonder, well, is it really worth the endurance cost of having to constantly be cycling Domination and Psychic Projection, or like two of those persistent cards in and out? I could see that being awkward. At level 8, we have Shared Nightmare. The top action is Attack 2, Target 2 at range 4 and Poison. If you consume Dark, you get to curse and add an experience, and you infuse Ice with this action. The bottom action is Move 4 and then Attack 1 at range 2, and if you consume Ice, then you can stun and gain an experience, and this is at Initiative 7. This is a little bit of an odd card to me in that it has top and bottom that have both ranged attacks on them. Now, I have spent this whole video talking about the negative condition build in a way that is assuming that you are using Withering Claw and using that to spread negative conditions to multiple enemies. Another strategy for doing negative conditions, though, would be taking a lot of these multi-targeted attacks that can get negative conditions on multiple enemies. You may not be doing as much damage with it, but you can be getting negative conditions on more enemies more quickly. And if you're thinking about it from that aspect, then this top action especially becomes pretty nice, where you can do attack 2 poison on a couple of enemies, and get curse into their decks. You're unlikely to be killing enemies with those top attacks. You'll still do a decent amount of damage, but it's nice in that you're not necessarily going to be concerned about killing them and accidentally not getting the curses into the deck. I still think this action feels a little underwhelming for a level 8, especially if you are not consuming that dark, like doing an attack 2, target 2 at range 4, and just poison. Yeah, you're infusing ice, but I don't know. It's not really grabbing my attention. That bottom action, on the other hand, is very nice because it is a direct upgrade to the bottom of Perverse Edge, where we are doing a move before we're doing a stun. You do still need to consume the ice to get stunned, but with this stun, we're doing an attack and stun. And it's a range 2 as opposed to just stunning an adjacent enemy. So that action is very, very good, and obviously Initiative 7 is super fast. Corrupting Embrace, on the other hand, is a top action of attack 1 and wound, and then an attack 2 and muddle. And the bottom action is move 4, and then on your next 4 melee attacks, add stun and curse to the attack. This is a persistent card that has 4 charges, and after you use those charges, it is lost. And this is at Initiative 15. To me, this card just blends in more with almost every Mindthief build. You're finally getting a top action that is non-lost, that has multiple melee attacks on it. Both of those attacks do negative conditions, so extremely repeatable top action. And then that bottom action is really amazing for being able to get some negative conditions out, being able to get some crowd control, and some curses into the attack modifier deck. This is a loss that I could actually see you justifying and using like in maybe your second or third rest cycle, if you want to try to maximize the value that you're going to get out of those curses. Because if you use it too late, you are probably still going to get all the value that you can out of your stun, but the curses are less likely to be drawn. So I could see an argument to using this loss fairly early just to try to turn the tides in like one of the earlier rooms, and so that way you're more prepared for a later room. And in that later room, the enemies are more likely to draw those curses. But I love both halves of this card. The initiative is still very good. It's not one of our best initiatives, but Initiative 15 is still extremely fast. Overall, great card. As for which card to take, honestly, I think in almost every case I would take Corrupting Embrace. I could see a Mindthief that's maybe doing a control-focused build that is also just doing just ranged attacks, in which case maybe you would take Shared Nightmare. I could also see a case where if you're trying to do just negative condition build that is not dependent on Withering Claw, then you're also taking Shared Nightmare. I mean, that's probably also a similar build to that control with this ranged damage. So if you were using any augments at all, Corrupting Embrace is going to be a much better pick because you can get 2 uses, like 2 different activations of your augment on that top action alone. Otherwise, if you are focused on that negative condition specialty and you really want to be able to have multiple augments running at the same time, this is where you'd go back to level 7 and take your other level 7 card. And finally, we've reached level 9. The top action of our first level 9 card, Phantasmal Killer, is another augment, and this says, after each of your melee attack abilities, control 1 target of the attack ability and perform attack 3. Then, after each of your control abilities, you may perform Consume Dark. 1 controlled enemy suffers 3 damage. Then you're going to get to do an attack 3 wound and gain an experience like you do for all of your augments. The bottom action of this is move 2, loot 1, go invisible, infuse dark. And this is at Initiative 67. Up until now, the Control Mindthief did not really care about augments. It was like, those aren't for me, you know, you other Mindthieves, you have your augments, you do what you will. And now the Control Mindthief is like, oh, you're saying I should do some of those melee attacks? I mean, this is just a very, very, very powerful augment. It is going to be more effective in higher player counts because then you're going to have more enemies that are adjacent to each other. But you get to do your attack, then you have that enemy do an attack against another enemy, and then you then have the controlled enemy suffer 3 damage. I mean, this is where you want to be having dark available as much as possible. But this just has the opportunity to churn out damage. And then that bottom action is just move 2, loot 1, go invisible, infuse dark. I mean, the initiative on this card, it kind of stinks, but who cares? We have plenty of really strong initiative cards that we can easily pair this with. This is just such a strong card for both its offensive and defensive capabilities in that being able to go invisible with yourself. Our last card is Many as One. The top action is a summon, and it is the Rat King that has 10 health, it has 3 movement, it has X attack value, where X is half the Rat King's current hit point value rounded up. Then the bottom action is another persistent loss ability that says each round the first of your allies who performs a melee attack ability gains the effects of each of your active augments for that attack ability. This is at initiative 91. Now let's talk about that summon first, because that summon can just be doing anywhere from 1 to 5 damage, or 1 to 5 attack for its turns. There's a few ways you could try to run this summon. I mean, maybe one way is that you have all 3 of your summons out now and feedback loop, although if you do that, you are going to have almost no endurance. That would be the extreme. I don't think I'd recommend that. This summon could replace your level 1 summon, in which case you're kind of getting a little bit of a downgrade to your level 5 summon, the Rat Monstrosity, because you might be less likely to have a consistent source of poison, depending on what cards you've taken at this point. But you could run the Rat Monstrosity and the Rat King at the same time. Alternatively, you could also use the Rat King to just replace the combination of the Rat Swarm and the Rat Monstrosity. You're doing less damage, but you are increasing your endurance. I think most likely you'll end up just kicking out your level 1 and playing both the Rat Monstrosity and the Rat King, and finding other ways to get negative conditions out on the enemies for your Rat Monstrosity summon. But you are going to be incentivized to try to keep the health up on the Rat King, because its damage is based on its total health or its current health. So this may encourage you to cycle into your level 4 augment more often, Silent Scream, to be able to make sure that you're maintaining the Rat King as close to max health as possible. That bottom persistent loss is just, I just love really wonky effects like this, because it's something that allows your allies to benefit from your augments for an entire attack ability, which is more than just one attack, it's the entire attack ability. This just makes it really fun to theory craft with the different characters in your party and the AoEs that they can do, and thinking about how can you maximize whether you're dealing extra damage or you're dealing poison and muddle to everybody. Thinking about just the fun combinations you can pull off with that bottom action, it's just a great time. And I don't know, especially if you're playing with other people, I think it's fun to be able to say, like, tell your allies, like, oh yeah, actually, if you want to benefit from my augment or augments this round, go ahead, you're more than welcome to. It's probably unlikely that they are benefiting from augments plural, because I would have a hard time imagining you playing the bottom of this and the level 7 ability Domination, because that's just a lot of persistent cards to be playing, but maybe in shorter scenarios you can make it work. As for which one to take, I mean, it's level 9. I think you kind of have an idea for which card you probably are drawn to. If you're going with the summon focus, you're probably going to take the Rat King. Maybe it's just like your final summon that you get for that. If you're going with the control build, you probably go with the top of Phantasmal Killer. I am most drawn to Phantasmal Killer. I just think that augment is really interesting. It provides a complete change up to how the control specialty is trying to work, but it can lead to huge damage output. And if you don't want to use it for that top augment for some reason, then you just have an incredibly powerful action that allows you to go invisible reliably. But it's level 9. Take whatever card you want. Now let's talk about perks. The first perk that I would take is going to be that first one that's listed there, which is replace 2 -1 cards with 1 +0 card after the attack ability control the target move 1. That control ability can oftentimes really not be that important. But this perk is just really good value because you're removing 2 negative cards and you're adding in a +0 card. So you're removing negative cards and thinning out your deck overall. It's a good way to just start trying to get more consistent damage output with the Mindthief and getting yourself closer to a feeling of, okay, when I'm playing this attack, I expect to be doing at least the amount of damage on this card. And so after you spend 2 perks on this, you will basically be down to a modifier deck that only has 3 negative cards in it, a -1, a -2, and a null, out of a total of 18 cards. Generally, the next perk that I would recommend is going to be add 1 Go Invisible Self rolling card. I would do this twice. If you are doing control abilities, though, I could see saying that you want to take this other 1 checkmark perk, which says whenever you control the attack of an enemy, you may have the enemy use your attack modifier deck. That is a really nice perk to have, especially as your attack modifier deck gets the negatives removed out of it. But I think it'll be kind of up to you to also gauge when you want to start using your attack modifier deck. But for any other Mindthief, or really for every Mindthief, being able to go invisible from attack modifier draws is not going to be very reliable, but when it comes up, it is going to be really nice to have and could allow you to play more aggressively. From there, I really like both the second and third perks. The second perk is replace 1+0 card with 1+1. Add +1 attack for each negative condition the target has card. And the other one is replace 1+0 with 1+2 card. Both of these are nice because they are just taking your neutral cards and replacing them with something better. If you're going for a build that is going to be trying to put out a lot of negative conditions, then you might get a little bit more value out of that second perk because you can get additional damage based on the number of negative conditions. But I actually might still recommend going for replace 1+0 card with 1+2 card first, because in order for the other perk to match the value of this perk, that enemy that you're attacking would have to have at least 1 negative condition on it already. Whereas this is just an unconditional upgrade of +0 to +2. Going over the rest of the perks, we have add 2 +1 immobilize cards. Again, that can be great for a negative condition build or a build that is leaning more into some of those ranged attacks. But the downside is that I don't always like these perks that just add positive modifiers into the deck because it makes it less likely I'm going to draw other things that I would really like to be drawing, like those rolling invisibility cards. Similarly, you can take the perk for add 1+2 and infuse ice card. You could take this 3 times, which is going to really drastically increase the amount of damage that you can be doing from your attack modifier deck and be giving you free ice infusions. You just don't know when those ice infusions are going to be coming up. At some point, by the time you've taken these, you might already have found that you have pretty consistent source of ice infusion and you can do it reliably. And by the time you draw one of these, you already have ice being infused, so it's less important. But even if you don't care about the ice, the +2 attack is really nice. Again, it just makes it a little bit less likely that you're going to draw some of those other modifiers because it is increasing the total size of your deck. Taking the perk to ignore scenario effects and add 1 rolling +1 modifier. You can take this pretty early. I'm never sure when I want to take this card. I usually just kind of base it off of like, maybe if I'm closing out one of those early rows of perks, and then I'm just like, oh, I have 1 extra perk. I'm not exactly sure where I want to spend it. I'll just put it on this ignore negative scenario effects. It is nice to be able to just have that rolling +1 modifier in there because that has come in handy in a number of scenarios for me. Next, you are considered to be last in initiative order when determining monster focus. I think this is going to really be up to you on when you feel like you might need this or not. As somebody who's playing solo where I have knowledge of all the initiative numbers, it's easier for me to be able to control that monster focus without needing this perk because I'm going to know exactly when all my other allies are going to be going, so I can kind of control my positioning around that. But in a normal game where you're actually playing with other people, I can see this being a lot more valuable because it gives you a little bit of safety, and when you're tied with range for with one of your allies, well, you get the benefit of the doubt, and the enemies are going to attack your allies instead of you. And then lastly, we have at the end of each of your rests, you may consume Ice or Dark to control 1 enemy within range 5 and have them perform an attack 1. This is a 2 perk modifier, or 2 checkmark perk. And I don't know, I don't like the fact that it's going to cost 2 perks and you still have to be consuming Ice and Dark, or I'm sorry, Ice or Dark. And then it's only an attack 1. Like, your modifier deck can be pretty good. This could potentially pair kind of well with that level 9 card, but at the same time, then it's like you're going to have to really consume Ice and Dark for it to get the most out of it. So I'm not a big fan of this perk. I'm curious if people have taken it and have gotten a lot of value out of it, but to me it just does not seem worth 2 perk marks. I'd rather prioritize other things. For our masteries, we have the first one, which says, in a single scenario, kill 5 or more enemies with control abilities. The second mastery is, in a single scenario, trigger the on-attack effect from 4 different augments at least 3 times each. This second mastery is relatively easy to get. It can kind of hurt how effective you are, but at least you can do it very early in your Mindthief career. Depending on what level you're starting out with for your Mindthief, the first mastery could be easy, but at level 1 it's pretty hard to do. And also, if you're not leaning into the control abilities at all, then this mastery kind of quickly becomes impossible to do. So, as I've mentioned before in like my playthrough videos and my Silent Knife guide, generally I just try to go for 1 mastery really early, and then I'm not all that concerned about doing the second mastery unless it's pretty easy. Just because sometimes those masteries can really like alter the way I want to play, and I don't want to be doing that. But getting at least 1 mastery is nice for a perk. Now we'll be jumping into talking about the solo scenario item, so if you don't want any spoilers for that, then fast forward the video. I have bookmarks for everything, so feel free to jump ahead. But this is our solo scenario item, the Psychic Knife. Add +1 attack to all your attacks from your augment actions. This is just a single-handed item. It's a passive ability, so it doesn't require you to have to unexhaust it or exhaust it. And I think this is a fun class item. I don't think it's the most powerful class item, but I do think it's fun in that it does really encourage you to lean into a mode where you are switching between augments. I think that was something of a miss from the first edition Mindthief, where it was really easy to get into a mode where you just played a single augment and that was it. You only ever played that one augment. Maybe you would cycle it out and then play it again. Because I think they were also non-loss in first edition. But I do like that this is encouraging you to try to play with different augments, and you get rewarded for cycling them in and out. It does take up a hand slot, so depending on what items you have unlocked, I could easily see it being hard to justify bringing this over some other items you might have access to. And if your primary specialty is going to be the control focus, then this is a little bit less enticing because you're just not as focused on trying to play multiple augments. But it's still very fun. It's passive, doesn't require you to do a whole lot for it, so I'm a fan. So that's our Mindthief guide. I had a great time playing this class. I honestly think it is more fun to play this version of the Mindthief than it is to play the first edition version. I think the first edition version is more powerful, but I think the first edition version was also objectively overpowered to the point where it just wasn't really that fun to play because it was way too easy to get stuns off and be doing huge attacks. I think you do have a lot of potential for very high ceiling with this Mindthief, but it takes a lot more to be able to set it up for it. I also love how there's just so much versatility in the play styles that you can have with the Mindthief. I talked about me seeing 4 different specialties, having the just focus on single target damage, the negative condition, the summon, the control ability. You can kind of mix and match those things to be able to customize your Mindthief, but like I said, I do like having like a primary specialty and then a secondary specialty. But I'm really interested to hear how other people have played the Mindthief, especially if you put a lot of value on cards that I have kind of brushed aside. So let me know in the comments what your thoughts are, what your feedback is about my evaluation of some of these cards, your own evaluation of the cards, builds that you have done. And feel free to go back to some of my actual playthrough videos and check out how I've played the Mindthief. Like I said, I've played it as multiple different types of Mindthief because I did initially start off as one build and then eventually respec into a summon focus build. Had a blast with them. And yeah, that's all I got. So thank you very much for watching. I appreciate your time, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care.